Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Rating Men I've Dated with Charles Burns. I'm your host, Charles Burns. I said last week that we're going to rate the long-distance marathon runner, but actually, I want to rate a different guy. Boop, 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 boop. Someone from like a decade ago. Rate someone from the past, from when I lived in Portland, Oregon. And fortunately enough for me, I never called them by their actual name. I renamed them and then only called them by the name that I chose for them and no one else called them that name or really knew about it. So I'm just gonna keep calling them that. I renamed them and then called them that the whole time that we were dating. So that might tell you something about the seriousness of our relationship. This week we've got Jack Sterling. Boom. I met Jack Sterling in a college class. It was French. It was a night class. I thought he was with somebody because he was really close with this other girl in class, and they were always together, so we just became friends, like the group of us. And then it turned out they weren't dating. They didn't want to date each other. They were just really close. And then it turns out Jack wasn't with her. He was single, and so then him and I started hanging out more, and then we started dating. I don't remember why we started calling him Jack Sterling, but if you saw him, you would get it. He just looked like a Jack Sterling. Things that were cool about him, he had gone to college twice. I met him at community college, but he was a Harvard grad and he had been in the Navy. He had a really funny tattoo that might have said something about semen. All right, we're going to rate Jack Sterling on the next 7 things. We have lover points, romance points, handsomeness points, helpfulness points, stability points, faithfulness points, and then finally, how it did. Right. First off, I want to talk about the seriousness of our relationship. Lopsided. Now, Jack Sterling was the first guy that ever took me on a date. He took me out to dinner, I remember, and he held my hand over the table, and he told me how much he wanted children and how much he wanted to build a home with someone. We've kissed one time and just made out one time, and you're telling me this stuff. And no one had ever done that with me on a date before. Yeah, no one had ever done that with me on a date. And I was in my mid-20s, he was in his late 20s, and it just like, it made, I don't know, yeah, so I think he always wanted to be more serious than it was. I'd only dated him for like 1 or 2 months, and then I went off to Europe, and I remember feeling kind of relieved that I could just like go to Europe and like not have to talk to him every day. I kind of had the impression that he wanted things to be like more stable and than they were. He was really working for that, but it just wasn't it wasn't in the cards yet. So he always wanted something more serious than I did. Sometimes people tell me, they're like, it's not good when somebody likes somebody more. It never really bothered me. I always felt like he liked me a little bit more than I liked him, but it didn't really bother me. Like I liked the way he liked me, and it was fine. But it was lopsided. We'll give it that. Let's get into it. Let's get to rating Jack. For lover points, I have to admit, I never went to bed with Jack Sterling. We slept in the same bed sometimes, but we never did anything more than kissing. I will say he had really plush, just juicy lips, and making out with him was a delight. He just had huge lips, and kissing him was fun. It was a nice experience. So just for that fact alone, let's give him a 5.5, which is being pretty generous since I don't know the whole story. As far as romance points goes, Jack Sterling really wanted a future. He really wanted to be with somebody, and I remember being very secure that he liked me. Like it was very obvious he liked me. He was very honestly trying to be in a relationship. I always did the good morning text and the good evening text. He wanted to stay connected throughout the day, which I find to be romantic. Just things like, he was just sweet and thoughtful, and it just made me feel like, oh, he wants to be in a relationship with me. I could tell. He was pretty romantic. I'm going to give him a 7.8 for romance. Thank you, Jack. As far as handsomeness goes, Jack Sterling might have been, well, he's one of the hottest guys I ever dated. He was he had been in the Navy, and he was just tall, dark, and handsome. He was Latino. He had big lips. He looked like kind of like a Superman maybe, like Kent Clark. He was like all American, kind of just great. He was gorgeous, so we're gonna give him a 9. He was a 9. Yeah, he was a handsome fool, that guy. I don't know what he looks like today, and it was like 10 years ago, so, if things change, I don't know. As far as helpfulness points goes, he wasn't very helpful. I will say that. Like sometimes, like I was moving and he didn't want me to move. He didn't like obviously want me to go to Europe, but I was gonna go, and he wasn't helpful during that time. I remember, and he sometimes. I think he sometimes wasn't quite aware of himself yet. Like he sometimes thought what he had to say was more important than other people's feelings. I met him in my mid-20s and he was in his late 20s. I will say as far as helpfulness goes, for a young man in his 20s, I will give Jack Sterling a 3.2 there. Thank you, Jack. But it would have just been easier if he had been like, oh, I'm worried that you're gonna leave and then you'll leave me and we won't be in a relationship anymore. And that would have been harder to say, I guess. It would have been better than just not being helpful. As far as stability points goes, his desire for stability was so much greater than his actual ability to be stable. Jack was trying so hard to be stable. He was in his later 20s. He really wanted to build a home. When I met him, he was a TA. He was living in dorms in a college somewhere. He had desire. His desire was high, but he just wasn't ready. He wasn't quite sure where he was yet. He seemed a little confused. So as far as stability points goes, who am I to judge? I mean, I left him to go and run off to Europe and just in Europe for a while. But I would say his stability was around a 4.5. He had the desire, but I don't know if he had all the skill sets yet to really be stable. As far as faithfulness points goes, yeah, I was very aware that Jack wanted me, and Jack was very clear on the kind of relationship he wanted, and he was very faithful. He was maybe a bit too faithful, if you can say it. Like he was just, I think maybe the word is possessive. I don't know. I always had the feeling that he just liked me more than I liked him, which I don't mind. I kind of like it when people like me, but I needed maybe more space than we could have. But as far as faithfulness points goes, I never thought Jack was going to do anything with anybody. And he always talked respectfully about our relationship. Well, till the end. So I will say faithfulness points, we'll give him an 8 point there. Thanks, Jack. The best part of being with Jack Sterling was knowing that he wanted something. He wanted a relationship very badly. I ended it 2 times. I went to Europe and I ended it, and then he didn't live in Oregon where we had met. And I moved back to Oregon briefly, and he came back and we reconnected in a weird way. I remember we went swimming, but I was seeing someone else, and I told him that. I said, I'm seeing somebody else and I don't want to date you. But he kept trying to get me to date him. And so then finally I had to be like, hey, I don't think we should hang out because like I keep telling you that I'm dating someone else and I don't want to date you, and you keep trying to date me, and I think this might be like a problem. And then he sent this really weird email. And the gist of the email was telling me that I was trans. That had like footnotes and quotes from like academic papers in it saying that he thought I was a trans man, or I was becoming a trans man, and that I should just be bold about it and just go out and be a trans person. And I found that just very inappropriate because he was just trying to tell me how to like present my identity. And I've always been like bisexual, and I've always said I'm like a half man, half woman. So he wasn't wrong when he was saying those things, but it's just like you don't need to do an academic paper to someone you want to be lovers with. And he seemed to think that like if I was becoming a man, that somehow made him less of a person because he was attracted to me. I don't know. It's very confusing, and there was just footnotes in an email from an old lover. It was very weird, and I did not like that at all, and I don't think I've ever talked to him since I got that email from him. So I will give the ending a 1.7. Don't send your ex-lovers emails with footnotes saying you think they're trans. Wouldn't recommend doing that. I am a very intricate and complicated person, and sometimes I'm a man and sometimes I'm a woman. That's really none of his business. He clearly was hurting, but it was inappropriate for him to tell me how to portray my identity. Nobody gets to talk, no one gets to tell me what to do, period. And no one gets to say that my identity is wrong, because it's not. It's just who I am, and I am complicated. Would I recommend dating Jack Sterling? I would say I hope he's changed a lot. Like, it's been years and years since I've dated him, over 10 years. So hopefully they're a new person now. Maybe they've transitioned too. Never know. But I would say people need to be self-aware. People need to be aware of what will make them feel things, because everyone has feelings. And a lot of people tell me they don't feel when they're clearly feeling something. And just to be aware of our feelings is more important, I would say, than controlling our feelings. We can't control them, but we can just be aware and then try to take space as we need. So that was one thing I learned from Jack Sterling. So we're gonna tally up all of Jack Sterling's points. We got lover, romance, handsome, helpful, stable, faithful, and the ending total score is 39.7. Ooh, go Jack. This is Jack Sterling's total score out of a possible 70 points. There you have it. Boom, boom. If you have any requests for any men that I've dated that you would like to see, please leave it in a comment below and like and subscribe for more episodes. I'll see you next Thursday for another episode of Rating Men I've Dated with Charles Byrne. Awareness is important. But the footnotes thing was also weird. Like, you don't need to put footnotes in an email to me unless it's a joke for some reason.